kicking off the list at number 10, astronomy. You ever want to date somebody, but they're a Libra and you're a Gemini? Ugh, ain't that the worst? Look, dating apps even have this now as a feature. You can write down what your symbol is, like, hi, I'm Kyle, I'm a Leo, and I love waking up early. Those are real bios for real people, and we have the Mayans to thank for all of this. The Maya studied the stars. They were the pioneers of our calendar, which I'll explain a little bit later on, but they also created lunar months. They figured that 81 lunar months added up to 2,392 days, meaning that one lunar month is 29.53 days, incredibly close to our modern moon month, which is crazy. They nailed it that long ago. They also studied Jupiter, Mars, and Mercury. They studied where each planet travels to and when. If you're a Libra, like me, smash that thumbs up. I'm a late Libra too. We're just trouble. We're the worst of the worst. Number 9, the Mayan calendar. It's 2022, which means the world thankfully did not end in 2012, but the Mayan calendar predicted that on December 21st, 2012, apparently it would be this massive doomsday. No meteors hit, that was all false, that wasn't a real thing. Thanos didn't snap any of us away, nothing like that happened. But that day did mark the end of their 5,125 year-long calendar. Yeah, and you thought you were a planner. Okay. The Mayan calendar is extremely accurate. Their calendar is 10,000ths of a day more exact than the calendar that the world uses today. They're that precise. We have leap years and stuff just to try and correct it. They used 20-day months and had 2 calendar years. They had a 260-day sacred round and then a 365-day year. Every 52 years, these 2 calendars would coincide with one another, and this was referred to as a bundle. Imagine if we still had this now, that'd be so confusing. But 10, 9, 8, what are we saying? 7.
At number 8, the last snack. For the Egyptians, a person's burial and their soul's final journey was a very big deal. We are probably all familiar with the mummification practices of the ancient Egyptians and all that, but what comes after was also pretty interesting. When someone died, it was believed that their soul would then move on to be judged. The soul would leave their body and go to the underworld searching for the Hall of Truth. Once they found it, they would then be judged on who they were in their life, and if they passed the test, then they got to go to paradise. But if they failed, then they became a nice little snack for the goddess Ammit. Ammit was known as a demon goddess and dubbed the devourer of Amenti. When the deceased was tested and their heart was weighed against a feather, if they failed that test, then Ammit would eat the person's essence and they would vanish for eternity. Obviously you wouldn't want that to happen, so I guess this was just an incentive for Egyptians to live life as a good person. At number 7, down the Nile. Now I know that I've mentioned the story of Set and Osiris a couple times now, but their story is just so messed up and weird that I have to keep including the best parts of it. Anyways, we all know that Set overthrew his brother Osiris as the king of Egypt, and did so by killing him, but let's talk about exactly how that happened. Set was a really jealous guy, and he resented his brother for being king, so he devised a plan to trick his brother into a coffin. Set had a coffin designed exactly for Osiris' measurements, and while at a party, Set challenged Osiris to get in it, as he promised that he would give the coffin as a gift to anyone who could fit inside it. So yeah, it was rigged from the start. So Osiris gets inside, and obviously it was a perfect fit. What he didn't know though was that this was where he would remain forever, because Set sealed his brother in the coffin and sent it down the Nile River. After that, Osiris' wife/sister Isis went to go find him, and blah blah blah, we already know what happens next. At number 6, Lady of Plagues. Guys, if you haven't already clued in, we're still in a panorama, a panzerati, a pandemic. It seems like it'll never end, and after learning about the Egyptian goddess Sekhmet, I think I know why we're all going through this. It's because someone pissed her off big time. Sekhmet was known as the Lady of Terror, and if you don't get a good sense as to who she was just by her name, just you wait. This goddess had the ability to spread pestilence and plague against anyone who remotely angered her. So judging by that, I think if you believe in this kind of thing, someone has some serious apologizing to do. Because of this insane power, Egyptians were brought up to know that they had to stay on Sekhmet's good side, otherwise it would be risking the health and safety of themselves and those around them. So this is a PSA to whoever made Sekhmet so mad. Please go apologize. Buy her some flowers, make a sacrifice or two if you have to. Please just make her stop. It's literally my birthday today, and all I want to do is live out my 20s in peace. Please, just do it for me. At number 5, kitty love. We all know that the Egyptians loved cats. Why? I don't know. I honestly can't see why you would worship those angry little fur devils, but hey, to each their own, I guess. The Egyptians even had their own goddess for cats called Bastet, and though you might think that she was just some crazy cat lady goddess, you would be very, very wrong. Bastet had a dark side to her and was known as the Lady of Dread or the Lady of Slaughter. Kind of fitting for a name for a cat goddess, since they are also evil to their core. She was known to kill other gods like the god Apophis, whom she slaughtered by cutting off his head. Regardless of her dark past though, the Egyptians still worshipped her, and many even worshipped her by bringing her offerings of mummified cats to her temple. Cats bring out the darkness in people, I'm telling you. At number 4, boozy blood. Sometimes we make bad decisions when we're emotional. Like those times that people punch walls when they're really mad and totally regret it afterwards. Well, even though they were deities, sometimes the Egyptian gods would do some regrettable things too. Ra, the sun god, had a mighty temper and was known to make some pretty rash decisions. At one point, Ra decided that he wanted everyone to just die, and so he instructed his daughter Hathor to slaughter all the humans that she could find. Hathor was totally on the same page and was like, okay bet, and went off to kill some humans. Luckily for humanity though, Ra came to his senses and had a change of heart, but by the time he caught up to Hathor, she became so bloodthirsty that there was no stopping her. So in an attempt to trick her into stopping her killing conquest, Ra filled 7,000 jars with beer and gave it to Hathor, who then became so drunk that she just gave up on her mission and decided not to kill everyone. Now they say that alcohol can't solve all your problems, but in this case it certainly did. At number 3, creation. There are so many creation stories out there created by various religions and civilizations. One of the more bizarre creation stories, however, belongs to the ancient Egyptians because their first god did something a little weird to create life as we know it. These ancient people believed that their very first god, Atum, created himself, and as such he had no wife and literally no one else to potentially procreate with, and so to create his children and thus create humanity, he pumped the hose and released humanity, if you get what I'm saying here. If not, you're too young to be here. Anyways, out of his pleasurable process, he created his kids Shu and Tefnut. This legend also created the term the god's hand and was used to refer to women back in ancient Egypt, since Atum's hand played the quote-unquote female role in the creation of his offspring. But yeah, I guess you could say that Atum was very pleased with what he created. At number 2, giant snake. There were a lot of strange animals in Egyptian mythology, one of them being a giant snake. The Egyptian god Apep was a giant snake who had some serious snake beef with their sun god Ra. They were polar opposites, Ra being the light, literally, and Apep representing darkness, chaos, and evil. One day, Apep just seemed to have had enough with Ra and all of his sunshine, goodness, and positive vibes, and just swallowed him up. He gobbled up Ra and the sun, leaving the world in complete darkness. Luckily, the other gods were there to save the day, and they had to slice Apep's belly open to free Ra and restore light to the world. This evil danger noodle lost this battle, but at least he got a taste of that spicy meatball in the sky. And finally, at number 1, a hearty meal. There are two sides to every person. Some people are nice on the surface, but they have a dark core that they keep hidden from the world. And the same could sort of be said for the Egyptian god Khonsu. You see, the gods were seen as helpful, but people also feared them, for good reason. I mean, these guys could pack a punch, and Khonsu was one of those guys with a serious dark side. Khonsu was the god of the moon, and was also seen as the god of healing. Sounds super positive and all, however, he was also known to eat people's hearts. Yeah, human hearts were a choice snack of his, but he was also known to dine on the hearts of select gods as well. He definitely isn't the guy to mess with because you might become his next hearty meal. Coming in at number 10, Nineveh. The Nineveh civilization was one of the oldest and most impressive civilizations of the ancient world. Located in what is now modern-day Mosul in Iraq, this civilization thrived mostly under the rule of King Sennacherib from 704 BC to 681 BC. Under his leadership, Nineveh was made the capital of the Assyrian Empire. Their kingdom was massive and had a lot of impressive infrastructure like a 15-gate wall around the city, as well as parks, aqueducts, canals, and an 80-room palace. This place was so extravagant that some scholars today believe that the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon were actually located in Nineveh and were commissioned by King Sennacherib. Other than their infrastructure, their culture was also incredibly impressive as well. Nineveh was known as a center for the development of arts, sciences, and architecture, and scribes and scholars from elsewhere would flock to Nineveh to further their studies. They had a library that contained over 30,000 inscribed clay tablets, and one of those tablets included a story of a great flood that drowned the world except for one man who survived by building a boat and searching for dry land. Does that story sound familiar? It might, since it's an early version of the story of Noah's Ark. This version of the story though was inscribed 1,000 years before it ever reached Hebrew text. Now, even though this was a large and powerful civilization, all good things must come to an end, and they met their end after a royal feud led to the breakup, and this led to the joint forces of Persians, Babylonians, and others in the area to burning Nineveh to the ground.
Number 9. The Mesopotamian civilization. Next up, we have the first civilization ever recorded in history. Their origins date back to as early as 500 BC in what's now Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Mesopotamia is a staple in history. It's actually the first society that developed agriculture, and its name translates to between rivers or land between rivers. It was a perfect spot to domesticate animals for farming and for food. The oldest wheel ever was found in southern Mesopotamian city of Ur. They invented the wheel, cursive writing, and something even more important than all, they invented beer. The oldest recipe for beer comes from Mesopotamia. Wheels, poems, beer, this sounds like the world's oldest, and dare I say it, best party. Of course, aliens also come into play too when looking back at Mesopotamian culture. They had an advanced understanding of the cosmos using astronomical instruments. Now, one of these instruments was this Venus tablet of Ammisadaka, which could predict these astronomical events. Maybe our earliest civilization made contact and now they're just trying to reach out. Can you get ghosted over a tablet? Probably. Number 8. Ancient art. Okay, here's where we're at with Neanderthals and art. First of all, we don't have actual representational art, but we do have symbolism. That's pretty close, and also just as fascinating in my opinion, especially when they look like this. These are eagle talons, right? They're about 130,000 years old. They were found recently in the Krapina Neanderthal site in Croatia. Now, researchers believe that they were part of a jewelry set, like earrings, or part of a necklace. I couldn't even make this now with the YouTube tutorial. You know what I mean? Yet somehow civilizations were crafting this thousands of years ago. 130,000 years ago. That's crazy. Number 7. The Indus River Valley Civilization. What's now modern Pakistan was one of the world's earliest societies ever. It was also referred to as the Harappan Civilization, or the Indus. And they were actually quite large. We often hear about Vikings and how, there were thousands of them, or the 300 Spartan warriors. Well, the Indus were in the millions. Aside from the other earliest civilizations, Egyptians and Mesopotamians, they were considered the most extensive. The world's first ever dentists came from the Indus Valley. Something way more interesting than dentist facts is that when compared to Egyptian ancient cultures, the Indus never built any palaces or temples, right? Meaning there were probably no priests or kings. But we still get to study ancient texts. Those are always fun and often confusing. The Indus Valley Civilization had a language that we're slowly but surely deciphering. But even so, there's around 250 to 500 characters that still remain a mystery. So, we can figure out what these guys ate thousands of years ago, but we have no idea what they were saying. Signs be hard. Number 6, Gobekli Tepe. Just 6 miles from the ancient Turkish city Urfa, Gobekli Tepe is 100,000 years old. And there are these massive stone circles created by a civilization that predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. We're convinced it's the world's oldest temple, a holy temple rather. This area in the world, now it may not be a spectacle, but thousands of years ago, you would be able to see the horizon in every direction from this point. You would also see herds of beautiful animals racing by. There'd be fields of barley, wild wheat. It would have looked like a temple from The Legend of Zelda. It was gorgeous and the landscape was fresh. Mind you, because it was so long ago. It was discovered back in 1960s. University anthropologists, they were doing a survey of the region, they found this place and assumed that it was an ancient cemetery and nothing more, and then continued on their merry way. Then cut to 1994, Klaus Schmidt was doing surveys for himself, found the same site, and knew right away from the first glance that this was man-made. Oh, imagine that. Imagine missing Gobekli Tepe the first time and being like, the cemetery. Number 5, Anasazi. Before the first skyscrapers were built in the 1880s, the Anasazi built massive stone buildings on the side of cliffs back in the 12th century. Some of these walls housed up to hundreds of residents, right? Like a skyscraper, a building, like a condo, just in the wall. What's now present-day Mesa Verde National Park was pretty intense back in the earlier days. Scientists have uncovered some hints as to where these creative cliff builders disappeared to. Well, violence. That seems to be the common denominator here. Yeah, the thing that's still going strong today, well, thousands of years ago, back in the 12th century United States, long-term drought led to the Anasazi to violence, and perhaps they wiped out each other. Other theories suggest that the Anasazi had to abandon their massive homes around the 1300s and then travel south. Either way, these are so impressive to look at. Number 4. Ancient Vikings. I'm a big Assassin's Creed fan. When they announced Vikings as their newest installment, I was pretty excited. Then I started playing it and I was like, yeah, that's not great. I'm a big Norse mythology fan, okay? But what actually happened to Greenland's Vikings? That's the mystery. Well, around 985 AD, Eric the Red arrived with a large fleet to colonize the island, and of course was subsequently banished for manslaughter. So now we have 2 colonies on Greenland, a large eastern colony, and a small western one. Now these Vikings didn't build massive pyramids, but instead they built stone churches that are still standing to this day. These Vikings were around for a few hundred years, and at one point in time there were 5,000 Vikings, give or take. Now that's incredible, but later on in 1721 a missionary expedition arrived and there were not 5,000 Vikings. In fact, there were no Vikings. Where did they go? Archaeologists did the digging and apparently the western settlement died off around 1400 AD. And just decades later, the eastern settlement was abandoned. Well, there's a handful of family fun movies that hint to what happened. The Ice Age. Yeah, well, the small one in the 14th century at least is the biggest factor on where these Vikings disappeared to. Yeah, just a small Ice Age classic. That's haunting for a Canadian to hear. Number 3. Easter Island. Back between 300 and 1200 AD, Polynesians used canoes, not Carnival cruise ships, canoes to somehow travel all the way to Easter Island, over 2,000 miles away from Chile. Yeah, that feat in itself is impressive, but when you start really thinking about the Easter Island heads on the actual island, it gets even more impressive. The Easter Island Moai statues, keep in mind there were hundreds, reach up to 32 feet high, and they weigh over 82 tons. It was a sight to see. That was until the 1800s. That's when the civilization suddenly vanished out of nowhere. Many of these statues were also destroyed during this time. The population as well was decreased drastically, and the island's higher-ups, be it priests or chiefs, whoever, were all overthrown. Well, whatever happened may give us some ideas for the future. Easter Islanders cut down so many trees that before their seeds could even enter the earth again, rats ate them. So these guys simply ran out of trees, which means they ran out of rope or the ability to make more canoes. So they were trapped. So naturally, a civil war began alongside starvation. Plus the arrival of Europeans in 1722, they immediately wiped out most of the remaining Easter Islanders. And then around the late 1800s, waves of smallpox reduced the amount of island natives to just 100. It was brutal. Number 2, the Mississippians. We'll dial back the calendar now to 700 CE. Now at this point, before European colonization, the American Southeast was home to the Mississippians. Their main area was the city called Cahokia, which is now modern-day Collinsville, Illinois. And that's not large either, it's just 6 square miles. Now check out this photo of Monk's Mound, a now historic site. We look at ancient Egyptians and our jaws drop at the sight of those pyramids, plus their alignment with the stars. That's obviously, of course, fascinating. Well, Cahokia was once home to pyramids and large wooden structures as well. We're not exactly sure what happened to this 40,000 person civilization, but experts guess famine and disease were one of the many factors. And finally, number 1. Clovis. Taking a look at some mammoth hunters for our last point here. Now this civilization is considered the first inhabitants of the New World. Pretty intense stuff. Hunters would use what's called Clovis points to get their next meal. They would use chipped flint, and they had to hunt bison, mammoths, deer, anything that had skin to be used for shelter and or clothing. In fact, this 10,000-year-old civilization may have disappeared at the same time as mammoths. After all, with these historical beasts acting as both your gear and your food, yeah, eating them ought to do some damage down the road. Not even an ice age was included yet, and already they're running out of resources. Starting our list off at number 10, the first skull. Before we get into some mysterious happenings in history, we have to talk about the very first Neanderthal skull that was ever discovered. The discovery came about back in 1829. The skull was found in a cave near Angus, Belgium. Now at the time, they didn't even realize it was the skull of a Neanderthal. That knowledge came much later, around 1856. And at that time, quarry workers were ripping apart limestone in a Fedhover cave near the Germany city Dusseldorf. But this skull was found in Neanderthal, a small valley of the Dussel River. Yeah. hence, the name. Now we understand that. The skull was human, but it wasn't. This was game-changing. Number 9, medicine. You can only imagine the various injuries Neanderthals would have, hunting down a mammoth or, a bison 3 times the size of you. Odds are you're gonna get a bruise or two. So what did Neanderthals do at this point? Well, that's what this pile of bones is for. Yeah, it's so dark, right? How did Neanderthals live so long without a pharmacy? All that yelling, no halls, that's gonna hurt. Neanderthals' medical skills are pretty similar to what our ancestors did. Herbal remedies, baby, that's it, herbal remedies. They managed fevers, but when the pain got too bad, chewing on a specific tree may have helped tolerate the pain. So now when looking back to these piles of bones, we find fragments of these leaves in their, dental cavities. We could study their teeth and be like, yes, I can see what you had for lunch. This makes sense. 40,000 years before penicillin, Neanderthals were chewing on aspirin. They were brilliant. Little dirty secret there. Number 8, Catalhoyuk. Another ancient city, another ancient mystery. This time we're looking at what's currently south-central Turkey. About 9,000 years ago, it looked a lot different. Catalhoyuk was popping off until 7,000 years ago, but again, we have no clue what really happened. The most interesting tidbit of history here is the way that this ancient civilization built their homes. They made houses side by side, really close together, and as fitting as it is for this channel, you would say it was almost like a hive-like system. They didn't have doors, they didn't have mail slots or welcome mats. Instead, they had holes on their roofs. That's how they got in and out every day. So yeah, they would use ladders to get in and out, which I gotta say sounds pretty exhausting. They're probably all pretty ripped. Number 7, Mayans. One of the most advanced civilizations on this list, the Maya, were somehow able to create these massive stone structures in the middle of southern Mexico jungles. Next to the Egyptian pyramids, I'd say these are almost just as popular at this point. One of the most interesting pieces of the Maya, I'm sure as we all recall, was their calendar and the way that they worked it. I mean, we made a movie about 2012. The news was talking about 2012. Literally 12 years after Y2K, we're like, what if it happens again? Like, this time seems serious. It's not gonna happen. We're good for now. We're gonna probably end ourselves before a calendar or, a movie does. The Yucatan jungles are filled with pyramids and beautiful complex monuments lost in time, but where did the builders go and why did they leave? Well, a couple scientists analyzed rock samples around these areas and they were able to study the water levels in nearby lakes, suggesting that the reason the Mayans disappeared were not aliens, but rather they collapsed because of a drought. That checks out. Aliens are cool, and the calendar stuff's cool, but no, they're just drought. Number 6, Gobekli Tepe. Just 6 miles from the ancient Turkey city Urfa, Gobekli Tepe is 100,000 years old. They are these massive stone circles created by a civilization that predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. Yeah, it's nuts. We're convinced it's the world's oldest temple, a holy temple rather. Because this area in the world, now it may not be a spectacle, but thousands of years ago, you would be able to see the horizon in every single direction. Herds of beautiful animals racing by, fields of barley and wheat. It would have looked like a temple from Legend of Zelda. Masterpiece. It was actually first discovered back in the 1960s by university anthropologists. They were doing a survey of the region, found this place, and assumed it was an ancient cemetery and then nothing more, and then continued on their merry way. Now cut to 1994, best year ever, Klaus Schmidt was doing surveys for himself, found the same site, and knew right away from the first glance that this was man-made and there was much, much more to it. Number 5, Clovis. We're taking a look at some mammoth hunters for this next point. This civilization is considered the first inhabitants of the New World. Hunters would use what's called Clovis points to get their next meal. They would use chipped flint. Now they had to hunt bison, mammoths, deer, anything that had skin to use for shelter, but also clothing. In fact, this 10,000-year-old civilization may have disappeared at the same time as mammoths. After all, with these historical beasts acting as both your gear and your food, the Ice Age ought to do some damage. Number 4. Anasazi. Before the first skyscrapers were built in the 1800s, the Anasazi built massive stone buildings as well on the sides of cliffs back in the 12th century. Some of these walls, by the way, housed up to hundreds of residents. They were huge. What's now present-day Massive Verity National Park was pretty intense back in those days. Scientists have uncovered some hints as to where these creative cliff builders disappeared to. Well, violence. Yeah, the thing that's still going strong today, thousands of years later, see, back in the 12th century United States, long-term drought led the Anasazi to violence and perhaps they just wiped each other out. Other theories suggest that the Anasazi had to abandon their massive homes around the 1300s and then travel south. Either or. Number 3, Easter Islanders. Back between 300 and 1200 AD, Polynesians used canoes, not carnival cruise ships, but canoes like little canoes and then somehow traveled all the way to Easter Island over 2,000 miles away from Chile. That feat in itself is impressive. When you start to really think about the Easter Island heads on that island, it gets even more impressive. The Easter Island Moai statues, keep in mind there were hundreds of them at one point, reached up to 32 feet high and weighed over 82 tons. It was a sight to see until the 1800s, because that's when the civilization vanished. But what happened? Well, many of these statues were destroyed during this time as well, so history doesn't really tell us much. The population was decreased drastically and the island higher-ups, be it priests or chiefs, were all overthrown. Well, what happened to them may give us some ideas for the future. See, Easter Islanders cut down so many trees that before those seeds could enter the earth again, rats ate them all. These guys ran out of trees, which means they ran out of rope or the ability to make more canoes. So naturally, a civil war began, everyone was freaking out, plus starvation. Also plus the arrival of Europeans in 1722, they immediately wiped out most of the remaining Easter Islanders. Then around the 1800s, waves of smallpox reduced the amount of island natives to just 100. Number 2, Vikings. I'm a big Assassin's Creed fan, and when they announced Vikings as their newest installment, I was so excited. I'm a big Norse mythology fan, but what actually happened to Greenland Vikings? There's a huge mystery around them. Well, around 985 AD, Eric the Red arrived with a large fleet to colonize the island, and of course was subsequently banished for manslaughter. Yeah. So now we have two colonies on Greenland, a large eastern colony and a smaller western one. Now these Vikings didn't build massive pyramids, but instead they built stone churches that still stand to this day. These Vikings were around for a few hundred years, and at one point in time there were 5,000 Vikings or so. That's incredible, that's a lot of Vikings. But later on in 1721, a missionary expedition arrived and there were not 5,000 Vikings, in fact there were 0 Vikings. Archaeologists did the digging and apparently the western settlement died off around 1400 AD, and just decades later the eastern settlement was, well, simply abandoned. And there's also a handful of family fun movies that hint at what happened to them as well. The Ice Age, well, the small one in the 14th century, but still an ice age nonetheless. Number 1, the Indus River Valley Civilization. What's now modern Pakistan was one of the world's earliest societies. Also referred to as the Harappan civilization or the Indus, were actually quite large. We're talking about Vikings in the thousands, but the Indus reached about 5 million. Aside from the other earliest civilizations, be it Egyptians and the Mesopotamians, they were considered the most extensive. The world's first ever dentist came from the Indus Valley, so thank you. Something way more interesting though than dentist facts is that when compared to Egyptian ancient cultures, the Indus never built any palaces or temples, meaning there were no priests or kings. But we still get to study ancient texts, those are always fun and confusing. The Indus had a language that we're slowly but surely decoding today, but even so there's still around 250 to 500 characters that remain a mystery. Kicking off the list at number 10, Roanoke Island, North Carolina. Just off the coast of what is now North Carolina, back in August 1587, around 100 English settlers arrived to Roanoke Island. John White, governor of the new colony, had to sail back to England to grab supplies. But while he was away, a naval war broke out between England and Spain, so his commute was delayed just a tad, you know. He got back 3 years later in 1590 with said supplies. He's like, hey, sorry I'm late, we got some naval war traffic, you know how it is. Upon arrival, however, nobody was there anymore, including his wife, daughter, granddaughter, anybody. Among the 100 or so inhabitants, they all vanished. The only hint as to where they went or what even happened was the words Croatoan and Crow carved into a wooden post, and CRO on a tree. Now Croatoan or Croatoan was the name of the Native American tribe that lived on the island as well. But after looking for evidence, theories, even archaeological exploration, experts still can't figure this one out. I've actually been to this island back when I was 16, so this one really creeped me out, not gonna lie. That's why I wanted to start with this one. Number 9, the Mississippians. We'll dial back the calendar to 700 CE. Now at this point, before European colonization, the American Southeast was home to the Mississippians. Their main area was the city called Cahokia, which is now modern-day Collinsville, Illinois. It's not large either, it's just 6 square miles. Check out this photo of Monk's Mound, a now historic site. We look at ancient Egyptians and our jaws drop at the sight of those pyramids, plus their alignment with the stars, it's all naturally fascinating. Well, Cahokia was once home to pyramids and large wooden structures as well. We're not exactly sure what happened to this 40,000 person civilization, but experts guess famine and disease.
And while talking about obsidian, let's coagulate that with tools of the trade, number 8. Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History has completed yet another season of excavation at the Maya city of Culuba in the first week of July 2023. This site has been a known archaeological treasure chest since its discovery, providing researchers with evidence pertaining to human sacrifice especially, which was a central component of ancient Maya culture. And wouldn't you know it, this season they discovered a sacrificial altar. The cubic stone bore all the hallmarks. They don't specify what hallmarks of an ancient sacrificial slab are, but I'd sure like to know. And it was further confirmed by the discovery of 16 sacrificial stone knives in the surrounding area, 13 of which are made with that Guatemalan obsidian. The sacrifice of animals and people, which would be prisoners or volunteers, was conducted by high priests using altars like the ones discovered. Alfredo Pereira Rubio, a researcher at INAH, did elaborate that while the 16 sacrificial knives were unearthed at this altar, none had ever been used. These knives themselves were offerings specifically for the gods. And speaking of stones, still, number 7 is how the Maya were rocking them tooth rocks. In the unique traditions, architecture, and aesthetic choices of the Maya amalgamated beautifully into an elaborate and architectural and artistic world. But it also played a huge role in how the Maya decorated themselves, right down to every tooth and nail. It has been long assumed that the Maya tooth modification was only carried out for ritual purposes. However, a new study published in the Journal of Archaeological Sciences challenges that. See, this culture believed that their breath was a link to the divine, and so ritualistic purification of the mouth, or in modern terms, brushing your damn teeth, was incredibly common. In some cases, people also had teeth encrusted with gemstones, such as jade, iron pyrite, hematite, turquoise, cinnabar, etc. Turns out the sealants used for that were incredibly medicinal. In modern times, we know pine resin attacks bacteria that causes plaque and eventual decay on teeth. Guess the Mayans did too. In the same way, they seem to know about the salvia plant as a binding agent with antibacterial, antifungal properties. I personally don't think I can stomach describing the process of tooth gem insertion in this video, but maybe sometime soon. However, Cristina Verdugo, an anthropologist, says this new study finally addresses the long-standing question of how these stones were affixed. Furthermore, besides knowing the secrets of shaping and boring teeth, the study suggests Maya dentists also knew the secrets of avoiding post-operative infections. On to, you guessed it, more rocks. My favorite in the countdown by a landslide of precious stones, number 6, blood jade and dance. Dance is more than an action, motion, and a means by which to pass the time. It is connection with our ancestors, with the light and the dark and the being around us. The Maya, like indigenous colonies spread around the world, felt the beat of the earth's heart under their souls and used them to pound into the ground in response. By leaping and moving, they could bring themselves into a trance-like state that they would ascend into Wayabis, aka spirit companions. The Maya would often cut themselves with sharp spines, bones, and blades to release their blood before dancing, helping bring on those transcendental experiences through sheer exhaustion. And when making a divine connection, would you not be dressed to the nines? I'm talking masks, paint, feathers, wheat, all entangled and weaved into elaborate colors and patterns. And stone. Heavy, heavy, heavy stone. Such as a 5-pound jade head pendant that had been found at Unicall, which would have once hung off the belt of a Mayan elite as he danced. And this Maya elite, like many others, would dance with an average of 25 pounds hanging off their body. The jade head pendant is more than just a belt piece as a result. The Maya had a concept they call kuk. Originally translated, it means burden. A kuk could be guilt, a physical weight, or in the case of these elites, responsibility, like the responsibility of public office. It was a way to remind him that he was not in his position as a freedom or as a luxury. Instead, he was there to serve his fellow Maya and carry the weight of their community. With every movement he made, he would have had a hard reminder that this was not just fun and games, and with every step of his foot, he would have felt the weight of that duty dragging him back down to the earth. Alright, now on to number 5, which will be the new ancient city. We have not had a break from rocks since our first point, but guess what this city's name is? Utucumne. What's that mean in Mayan? Stone column. Don't think you escaped from the rocks. And speaking of escaping, that's exactly what this city did for a very long time. It went completely unnoticed until, thanks to the recent approval of airborne laser scanning on the central Mayan lowlands. After receiving LiDAR images showing man-made changes to the landscape, Ivan Sprak and his team thrashed their way through 60 kilometers of vegetation to reach this site. On the elevated terrain, they found several large buildings, including a number of pyramid-shaped ones measuring more than 15 meters. The cylindrical stone columns, which prompted the researchers to name the site Ulucumna, were probably entrances to rooms in the upper parts of the buildings. The team has also found altars, 3 plazas, and a ball court. Pottery unearthed at the site appears to indicate it was inhabited between 600 and 800 AD, a period known as Late Classic, but Sprach said the site probably underwent considerable changes between 800 and 1000 AD before falling victim to the collapse of the lowland Maya civilization in the 10th century. A mystery they're still hoping that the rediscovery of this lost Maya city can help unwind. Was it environmental degradation, political unrest, warfare, or the decline of trade networks? Number 4 is coming, and he's a terror. The plight of gods, the destroyer of man. He is Smoking Frog, the conqueror. It really is an unenviable job to be the decipherer of Mayan script, which utilized logograms, symbols, and glyphs that were near impossible to comprehend. And hallelujah, someone recently figured out that the little pictures were in fact words. So, the secrets of numerous surviving stelae and inscriptions from the many Maya ruins are finally coming into light, such as the events from the 14th of January 378 AD. That was the day when a foreign warlord, Siya Kaka, conquered Tikal in the most powerful of all Mayan cities. He had been dubbed Smoking Frog because his glyph looked like a smoking frog. Siya's name actually means fire is born, and he was an exceptionally powerful man who hailed from Teotihuacana. Oh, you know, just the most advanced Mesoamerican civilization that we know nothing about to this day, like their ethnicity, appearance, economics, or culture. Just poof, nothing in history. We do know it was a super city, however, which of course placed it in direct conflict with the equally powerful Maya civilization. So, from what historians can gather, the king of Teo set Fire is Born, who is either his brother or his right-hand man, off to go F up the Maya Empire. Several recently discovered stelae help scholars piece together the puzzle of Siya and the movements towards Tikal, mapping his path. Word must have traveled to Tikal of the invasion, and the forces met for a battle 16 miles from the city. This meant that an entirely new era was beginning in the metropolis, as all subsequently erected stelae would tell of Siya and his successors. This story truly is insane, but to dive into details would make it run long, so we'll stick a pin in that for now and move on to unraveling the Red Queen, which is number 3. Archaeologists claim that only 10% of the ancient Maya city of Palenque has been explored so far. Among the ruins of Temple X111, where in 1994, Mexican archaeologist Arnaldo Gonzalez Cruz and his team made a legendary discovery, a tomb dating back to 600 or 700 AD. Excavations were being carried out at the temple to discover its construction sequence and the methods used in building it, with no prior knowledge of burials there. Then they stumble upon what's starting to seem like a big old tomb, attention focused to cleaning its area, and they discover a small blocked up door on a second level of the temple plaza. When they remove the block, it reveals a long corridor leading to one of the best preserved galleries discovered in Palenque to date. A few meters later, and there she was. The sarcophagus was a massive square of limestone, and inside was the remains of a noblewoman and other objects painted and powdered with red cinnabar, earning her the name the Red Queen. This is the richest known burial for a female Maya leader. She has a headdress of green stone and shell, a collar of shell and bead, a diadem of apple green jade loops, and then there's the funerary mask, with obsidian eyes conveying a striking sense of the presence of a queen. Inside the sarcophagus, archaeologists also discover a seashell with a small limestone figure in it, which is pretty cute. Oh, and then there's also some guy buried in the chamber too, but it's assumed he's a servant sent to the afterlife to serve her. He's just Ken though, so back to Barbie. Researchers found that she lived between 600 and 700 AD, and while her name is nowhere found in the tomb, Gonzalez Cruz believes that she was Tizaki Awa, the wife of Pakal and the grandmother of the last Mayan king. The remains of the Red Queen were returned to Palenque in June of 2012. She couldn't be reburied in her original tomb due to the high humidity, so she's reburied in a different one close to the location of her ancient home. In July of 2018, her funerary finery, including the burial jewelry and the death mask, were restored by archaeologists and historians and put on display in Mexico City. Speaking of the dead, number 2, the entrance to hell. When the meteor that destroyed the dinosaurs landed, it landed and hit the water near Hucanta. Sands there became porous, turning most of it into thick rock, but also giving it the ability to waste away with time and form sinkholes, aka cenoids, which people like to swim in on vacation, and Mayas believed were literal access to hell. So, Gilmore de Anda's team spent 5 years looking at 450-year-old historical records from the Spanish Inquisition to locate a series of sacred caves believed to be the Hell Passageway. The Spanish had been outraged that the Mayas continued practicing their old religion even after the persecution, so they used court trials to make them reveal the locations of the places where they performed ceremonies. That testimony leads de Anda to X on the map. Among de Anda's discoveries are broad, perfectly paved underground roads stretching 100 meters, a submerged temple, walled off stone rooms, and the confusing crossroads of legends. In one chamber, it's impossible to move without slashing your skin, which is a representation of the Room of Knives. While Deanda has not yet encountered a specific jaguar chamber, jaguar bones have been found in at least one cave. Subterranean roads interrupted by deep pools of water may signify the rivers of blood and pus. Why go into the trouble of reproducing a hell? Perhaps it was a way to demonstrate power, Deanda said, or to give an idea of the terrors that they would meet en route to paradise. For now, Deanda's team is connecting tunnels and caves looking to uncover more. The most emotional for last, number 1, will be They Burned Books, aka the July 12, 1562 tragedy at Mani. What can only be called a literal villain to history is a monstrous man named Friar Diego de Landa, whose act of faith at the city of Mani, Yucatan is the most significant example of historic destruction or burning of the Maya books. Something he documented with excitement and pride in 1566 as he had removed the demons from indigenous hearts. Diego de Landa was among the first Franciscans to arrive in Yucatan. He took the time to learn the language and mirrored cultural behaviors to start earning the trust of the 19 independent chiefdoms. This is the first time he sees Maya texts, which he interprets as idolatry and messages from the devil. In fact, they're written records of the indigenous communities, histories, crops, laws, land, and legends. It was around this time he decided to use physicality to force conversion. He persisted in eradicating traditional indigenous beliefs through extreme violence and torment, and encouraged the other friars and lay people to do so as well. Indigenous Mayans began to take their own lives in response. Then comes the day. It's July 1562, and 2 boys exploring find a hidden cave in Mani where a shrine and altar had been set up. They snitch to the friar, who assembles a mob. People were burned in their thatched house, some flogged, many ran to take their own lives, and others were just killed. Then came the burning. The friars, under Diego's demands, raid the homes that still stand. Their written records are stolen, as are their clay idols that hold the ashes of their ancestors, and in a bonfire facing the monastery, all were burned. Everything. These wooden clay representations of their ancestors filled with ash, their family documents and history, all integral to the descendants' inheritance. The foreign priests understood the significance of what they called superstition and idolatry when they burned these idols. By destroying these articles, they literally ripped people's identities away from them, their standing in the community, and their title to their land and property. The ancestral traditions lost lie at the roots of this tragedy, as does the history we will never regain. Despite an estimated 90% of Mayas dying from disease, war, and forced labor during the 16th century Spanish conquest, I want to make it clear, Maya people and culture has never disappeared. An estimated 6 million Maya people still live in Guatemala, Belize, the West Honduras, Salvador, and southern Mexico alone.
At number 10, brotherly love. There were some weird things happening between the gods in Egyptian mythology, as we will come to learn through this video. To get us started on this journey through the strangest of stories, let's talk about some serious closeness between the gods Osiris and Isis. These 2 gods were husband and wife, but they were also brother and sister. Yeah, it's weird, but they were gods, so I guess it was fine. These 2 ruled Egypt until their other brother Set killed Osiris. When her husband died, Isis went on a search to find Osiris's body because she just really wanted to have a child with him and just wasn't gonna let pesky old death get in her way. When she found Osiris's remains, she was able to resurrect him for long enough for them to conceive a child. However, that process was a little difficult because she wasn't able to get the most important part of him for that because a fish had apparently eaten his member. Again, Isis was a very resilient woman, and quite crafty too because she just crafted him a new device, if you will, and they went on to produce a son, Horus, who would later become the new king of Egypt. This story is a little weird, don't get me wrong, but it's also a story of perseverance, I guess, so maybe it's not all bad. At number 9, trophies. I know a lot of people like to save little mementos and souvenirs from things that meant a lot to them in life. People save movie stubs from their first date with someone, little objects from their childhoods, and a whole collection of other things saved from different points of their lives. There was an Egyptian god who sort of did the same thing, but a little creepier. Well, actually it was a lot creepier. The god Anubis was the god of mummification, and I guess you could say that he just really liked his job. He was part of the embalming process for some big names like Osiris. See, tying it back to the previous story when the god Set killed his brother Osiris, he got pretty buddy-buddy with Anubis because he offered Osiris's organs to the god of mummification. But not for Anubis, since he was known to collect pieces of the remains of people that he had embalmed. He had a thing for limbs and other remains, I guess. It was a weird collection to have, that's for sure, but for the god of mummification, it almost seems fitting.
Number 8. Light as a feather. So unlike a lot of religions we've heard of, there wasn't really a concept of hell in Egyptian mythology. It was either you were worthy of heading into the afterlife or you weren't. Mat was the goddess of harmony and supported the belief that if harmony was disrupted, it must be restored. Every ancient Egyptian myth in some form follows this format. But the most important role she played was in the afterlife. When the soul left the body, it would appear in the Hall of Truth in order to stand judgment before Osiris. The heart would be weighed on a golden scale against Mat's white feather. If the heart was heavier, it would be devoured by a monster and the soul would disappear. If it was lighter, then you could go live in eternal bliss. So instead of several layers of burning torment, souls in Egypt instead faced eternal darkness and unconsciousness. The idea of non-existence was more terrifying than being cut up by demons. Number 7. Osiris and Isis. Okay, so we aren't strangers to deities being a fan of incest. It was kind of like how they multiplied, and ancient Greeks were okay with it, kind of, but they kind of weren't. Anyways, the Egyptian gods were no exception. Isis and Osiris were 2 of the 4 children of the goddess of Nut. Isis and Osiris were married and actually really in love. They dug each other. When Osiris rose to the throne as the eldest sibling, his brother Set was pretty jealous. So he took the life of his own brother, cut him into little pieces, and scattered them all over Egypt. He really wanted to make sure the guy was dead. But then Isis wasn't someone you wanted to mess with. She had great magical powers capable of restoring life. She collected all of the pieces of her brother/husband and breathed life back into him. Osiris returned to life and they made all the love and then soon conceived a child named Horus. However, Osiris couldn't return to the land of the living, so he had to stay and rule over the underworld. So his son Horus was left to get revenge, and we'll get to that later. Number 6. Anubis. Now, I think in Western films that depict ancient Egypt, like The Mummy Returns, the god Anubis is often associated with the underworld. You know, that creepy half-man, half-jackal creature who appears to walk out of your nightmares? Like, he's so creepy. Well, he did used to run the underworld until Osiris took over, but he was actually the god of mummification and the afterlife. So, not wrong, but not the whole story. Anubis was the son of Nephthys and Set. Well, kind of. Nephthys actually never conceived the child with Set. She kind of had the hots for Osiris, so she disguised herself as Isis and made love to him that way, and then Anubis came to life. That may have been one of the reasons Seth attacked Osiris in the first place, as his suspicions rose. But it was actually Anubis who helped Isis piece together Osiris, creating the first mummy. Fun fact, during the Greek rule of Egypt, Anubis and Hermes were seen kind of as the same, the people who ferried the dead to the underworld. Oh, sorry, and a point. Anubis was actually the one who weighed people's hearts, so he used the feather, the thing, you know what to do. He was responsible for doing that. Number 5, Horus and Set. Speaking of Horus, earlier, remember how I said Horus had to take over defending his father? Well, here is where this story begins. When Horus grew up to be a man, he pulled a Hamlet. He was like, "You killed my father, prepare to die." Thus a series of battles ensued, and one of the gods didn't play fair. Set kept cheating at everything and continued to come out as victor. Not surprising, since he didn't earn his way on the throne, he killed for it, kind of like a certain Claudius. Eventually, Isis stepped up to help her son/nephew overcome her brother. She set a trap for Set, but after some pitiless begging for his own life, she let him go. Horus was pissed, so angry some of the other gods got upset that he was so angry. They agreed to compete in a final boat race, and Horus was like crushing it. He was doing really well, he was about to win, but then of course Set cheated by turning into a hippopotamus and attacked the boat, therefore claiming victory once again. Osiris finally showed up and declared that no man should take the throne through murder. So Horus took the throne. Why Osiris didn't just settle the whole deal from the beginning is confusing in itself, but hey, kinda reminded me of the eagles that showed at the end of Lord of the Rings that could have saved like 3 movies, you know? Kinda like that. Anyways, let's move on. Number 4, Ra and his boat. Ra is one of the most revered gods in Egyptian mythology, especially since he was the god of the sun. He was depicted as a man with the head of a falcon. That kind of makes sense. He was once the greatest of all gods, but had to take a step back after he got too old and tired, and especially considering his task, I can see why. His job was to drive away darkness and sail across the skies, delivering light wherever he went. But at night, he would dive into the underworld and have to cross 12 gates. 12 hours, an hour per gate. After paying his respect to Osiris every night, a giant snake named Apophis tried to attack and swallow the boat. Every night! Poor guy, no wonder he got worn out. Every day it got harder to defend, and even one night, Apophis succeeded, but could only hold the sunlight for so long. She threw it up, which explained solar eclipses. After Set was cast out after the whole nephew battle, he ended up serving Ra in his boat and kept the snake at bay, but there's something confusing coming later that I think you'll agree is very confusing, so here we go. Coming up next we have Bast, number 3. Have you ever had a cat look you up and down and kind of like expect something? Like worship? You know? Are you a cat person? Dog person? Let me know in the comments. Well, that's because cats were a big deal in Egyptian mythology. They even had their own goddess. Bastet was a cat goddess depicted as a woman with a cat's head. Cats had a meaningful role in ancient Egypt as they protected their food from rats and snakes. They were even seen as family members, and to harm one was punishable by death. Legend says that sometimes cats would enter burning buildings to save their families. If they died, the goddess would bring them back to life, hence the idea of cats having 9 lives. There it is. Now here's where things get confusing. You know that story I told about Ra? Well, apparently Bastet was in the boat with him as well. During the day she would ride with him, and at night she would turn into a cat and then defend the boat from Apophis the snake. But I thought that was Set. So many conflicting things. I saw like a couple different stories who said each thing was different, so who knows. Number 2, Jeb and Nut. Yet another sibling partnership. We have Jeb and Nut. They fell deeply in love and could never be separated. They were that couple who would like constantly be like, oh my god, stop, right next to each other at dinner, you know what I mean? Jeb was the god of the earth and Nut was the god of the sky. A previously mentioned god, Atum, found their union inappropriate, so he pushed Nut into the sky far away from Jeb. He just didn't like being a third wheel. Jeb and Nut were close enough to see each other, but could never hold each other again. And she gave birth to Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. Some say Horus too, but I don't think that's true. Number 1, the treasure thief. Okay, I don't know how I feel about this story, okay? This doesn't really feel like harmony is in balance, but anyways. The treasure thief ends in a way I really didn't expect, and I'm not sure you will either. Long ago, a great pharaoh with a wealth of riches decided to build a pyramid in which to keep them safe. One of the builders was wise to his plan and decided to find a way to claim them for himself. He built a stone vault with a hidden entrance covered by a slab so he could get to the riches, but unfortunately he fell ill before he could return, so he told his sons of his plan. The sons headed to the pyramid in the dead of night, following their father's order, but unbeknownst to them, the pharaoh had laid booby traps and one brother was caught in one. Not wanting to be found or interrogated, revealing his other brother, he told his brother to chop his head off. Ugh, that he did. Loyalty? I don't know. The pharaoh, upon finding the body, hung it up in the town square in the hopes of like weeding out whoever it belonged to. But the other brother, being so clever, got the guards drunk and stole back his brother's body in the dead of night. The pharaoh was like, I'm not even mad, I'm just impressed. He gave the thief a pardon, summoned him to the square, and gave his daughter to marry him. Yeah dude, you tried to steal my jewels? Don't worry about it. Have my daughter, because you're so talented at your job. Great work.
It's an orderless list as we start off with the Khmer Empire. Like a video game, I'm gonna give y'all their stats. So, where? It's across today's Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. When? 800 to 1400. Strengths, advanced water system, strong economy, natural resources. Weaknesses, uncontrollable population. Rival civilizations, overexpansion. Fun fact, the Khmer Empire only lost one major naval battle in 600 years. Hella relevant, seeing as the Khmer Empire really embraced that whole water is life thing. The civilization had an extensive water network so that their capital city, Angkor, would flourish no matter the season. Angkor was also at one point one of our world's largest cities, covering 386 square miles and accommodating around 1 million people. Very hydrated people, that is. The advanced water system contained a network of channels and reservoirs that utilized monsoon climates to collect water for use in dry season. Each area of the city had 2 channels of water running through it for fresh and for soiled, earning it the title of the hydraulic city by our contemporary historians. The gradual decline of the Khmer Empire can be attributed to 3 main factors: the diluting of their culture through too many new strands of Buddhism, a gradual weakening of their water network, and an overexpansion that brought them into conflict with the neighboring Ayutthaya kingdom. Alright, 1 is done, now 2 for you. Let's check out the Hittites. So, stats, where? Across Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. When? 1700 to 700 BC. Strengths? Expert chariot makers, iron manufacturers, and they had the fortified city of Hatsua. Weaknesses: drawn-out rivalry with the Egyptians, city-states had no political unity, and a slow economical advancement. Fun fact, Hittite battle axes were literally shaped like human hands. Yeah, I know, right? Kinda cool. Alrighty, so these guys at their peak actually rivaled Egypt's kingdom and made them look like a bunch of backwood hicks. In fact, they were the ones who were effing up Egypt so bad, Ramses II had to sign a peace treaty with them, only after they had the world's largest chariot battle, because boys will be boys or whatever. So, how'd these guys manage to slip from historical radar? Well, it wasn't just being assumed into the Assyrian Empire, it was because, like the Khmer, their culture varied considerably between regions and became too diluted to be consistent. Also, like many other forgotten civilizations, Hittite lands were divided up into city-states with no political unity. The Hittite Empire collapsed in 1160 BC after civil war and a scramble for the throne. Scattered and leaderless, a settlement was formed between the Syro-Hittite people, and this was only for a brief respite before they're invaded by the Assyrians in 700 BC.
At number 8, Vinca. We're throwing it all the way back to the Neolithic period because we're talking about the Vinca civilization. Vinca is known as the oldest Neolithic civilization in Europe. These guys were establishing their own civilization in the Stone Age long before civilizations like Egypt and Mesopotamia. Though we don't know all that much about them, we do know that they had one of the earliest writing systems in the world. Researchers have discovered around 700 characters that are believed to have been their way of forming written sentences, though this is all just a theory for now since these characters have yet to be translated. The archaeological evidence that has been found from the Vinca civilization suggests that this group of people thrived in the area along the banks of the Danube River for more than 1,000 years before being abandoned. No one really knows why the Vinca civilization abandoned the area or where they went, but maybe one day we will get those answers.
Number 7, the Mayans. It's 2021, which means the world thankfully didn't end in 2012. But that movie was good. Kind of, not really. But the Mayan calendar did predict that on December 21st, 2012, this would be the end of us. No meteors hit and Thanos didn't snap away any of us, but that date did mark the end of their 5,125 year-long count calendar. Yeah, and you thought you were a planner. These guys were crazy. One of the earliest uses of the number 0 being in mathematics came from the Mayans. They were super advanced for their time, and they were also quite artistic. They drew complex hieroglyphs on long strips of paper made from fig tree bark. I can't write 4 sentences down on paper without my wrist hurting. I have to slap it around for a minute. These guys are on a whole new level. These stories date all the way back to the late pre-classic period, so around 300 BCE. That is so old. The Olmecs of Mesoamerica figured out how to consume chocolate, sure, but like the art that we see etched into the stone walls around them, the Mayans made it beautiful. The Mayans would mix chocolate with water and chili peppers and honey. They would make it as a spicy drink. I'm gonna stick with the old pumpkin spice for now. I think that's the riskiest I'll go. Thanks so much though. Debit.
At number 6, Margar. Even though Margar was a pretty impressive civilization, no one really knows about it because very little interest was invested in learning more about it. Margar was one of the oldest civilizations in the world, situated in what is now modern-day Pakistan. Excavations of the site started back in the 1970s, but due to the government's lack of interest, looting, and land erosion, it made it hard to learn much about this ancient settlement. From evidence that has been gathered, we do know that Margar had a population of around 25,000 people, and based on some of the remains recovered from this ancient civilization, there was evidence of dental surgery, which, as you can imagine, isn't really something you see very often, especially at the time that this civilization existed. Other than that, many of the other secrets of the civilization are buried very deep in the earth, so it makes it much harder for researchers to uncover them. What has been found though are some pretty well preserved buildings made from brick, and even a formal cemetery. Who knows what else we might learn from this site.
Number 5, Rapa Nui. Also referred to as the Easter Islanders, the Rapa Nui is known most famously for their Easter Island heads, the moai, that still to this day reach up to 13 feet tall and weigh over 80 tons. Massive achievements. Now how did they build these things, and also how do they move them around? Well, there's of course a crazy alien theory, and it's my favorite theory of all. The indigenous Rapa Nui claim that these statues once roamed the land, like Night at the Museum, but with, less bubblegum and fun. There were once thousands of these sculptures, but during the 1700s, civil wars resulted in the Rapa Nui tearing them all apart. It was already an impressive feat building the moai, but in 1914, archaeologists discovered they also had bodies beneath them. Just like us YouTubers, you never know underneath here. We could be 7 feet tall, or we could be 5 feet tall. You really don't know. Look at this. You have no idea. The theory that all these statues would move around seems a little bit more plausible now that we know that.
At number 4, Nubia. The ancient civilization of Nubia was almost like ancient Egypt adjacent until it wasn't. Nubia was located south of Egypt in Sudan, and at one point they even ruled Egypt. Nubia even had their own pyramids, and over 200 of them still remain today. The period that the Nubians ruled over Egypt was known as Egypt's 25th dynasty, or the Black Dynasty, because of the dark skin of the Nubian pharaohs, and this time was known for its stability and prosperity, with a lot of their emphasis being on arts and culture of the people. This civilization had their own written language and rich culture, and they were also very wealthy as they were situated on a literal gold mine. They continued to thrive until an Egyptian pharaoh raided Nubia and turned it into a mineral extraction outpost. Rather than Nubia rule over Egypt, the tables turned and the roles were reversed, making Nubia an underling of Egypt. Eventually, the Nubian people just assimilated into the Egyptian population, and Nubia just died off over time.
Number 3. The Incas. Their city is currently a wonder of the modern world. Machu Picchu was built over 500 years ago. It was once known as the lost city of the Inca, and it's absolutely beautiful. It was first discovered in 1911 by archaeologist Hiram Bingham when he and a small team were originally heading out to find the ancient city of Vilcabamba, but instead they found this landmark. The stones used to build the city were even heavier than they already look. We look at Stonehenge in disbelief right now, wondering how humans were able to lift those rocks, but look at this place. These stones each weighed over 50 tons, and with Machu Picchu literally translating to Old Mountain, those hills certainly don't look easy to climb. I complain about doing 2 trips carrying groceries. My back hurts just looking at this thing. The Inca were impressive builders. The city is designed perfectly. I mean, evidently. After 500 years of earthquakes and horrible weather, it's wild that the city is still in the shape that it's in. Elongated skulls were also found on the site by archaeologists, and many believe that it's aliens thanks to pop culture, but elongated skulls were actually a sign of royalty in the Incas. It's no surprise Machu Picchu is the most visited place in Peru. You just might want to take your trail shoes when you head over there.
On number 2, Norte Chico Civilization. The story of the Norte Chico Civilization is fascinating, yet also shrouded in mystery. Overall, very little is known about the Norte Chico Civilization, but it is believed that this pre-Columbian society is one of the oldest known civilization in the Americas. Researchers know more about this civilization's infrastructure than the way that the people lived. We know that they had huge buildings like pyramids and complex irrigation systems, but what makes this so bizarre is the fact that there's no evidence of any pottery in the civilization, which suggests that they don't know how to use it. How are you gonna build a whole pyramid but struggle to make a pot? I don't get it. There is also evidence that these people worshipped some kind of deity, but again, no one knows what form this deity took. Now here's where the mystery really comes in. No one knows what happened to the Norte Chico civilization. The settlements were abandoned sometime around 1800 BC, but no one really knows why. There's no evidence of any kind of warfare, and there were no natural disasters to cause them to flee their homes. The people just kind of disappeared, and no one has been able to piece together the puzzle, so we may never know.
And coming in at number 1, the Greek civilization. The Antikythera mechanism is the world's oldest analog computer. It would keep track of the cosmos, and to this day we're trying to figure out the exact purpose of it or how it was built. But what we do know is that one of those dials in there was meant to keep track of the Olympics. That's how important this event was. Thanks to the ancient Greeks, now we get to see dudes hucking shot puts at people. It's great. The ancient Greek civilization thrived in Greece around 500 BC to 2700 BC. The rich history of ancient Greeks spans such a long time that we've divided their time into periods, like the Archaic, Hellenistic, and Classical period. Their wine was so good that they had a wine god in the pantheon, god Dionysus. What an OG. It was deemed a hubris for Greeks to get intoxicated, so they would also add water to their wine. That way they could keep the party going all night, of course, but actually it was done so nobody became violent. Only god Dionysus would drink wine straight out. That's pretty hardcore. If inventing the Olympics wasn't badass enough, they also used stones instead of toilet paper, so I'll let you imagine that in your head. We'll leave on that note. That's a nice pretty image to finish on.
Number 10, snake eyes. Well, not exactly snake eyes, but after extended use of belladonna drops in the eyes, you would probably wish that a snake bit you in the eyes. Belladonna is poisonous. It's a no calzone, red flag. But yet it was still used by Egyptian royalty. Basically, the drops of poison would dilate your pupils, and that would be considered to be beautiful. For some reason, I guess. Okay. Extended use of the drops had terrible side effects for the user, blindness being one of them. You gotta remember, folks in this time have no social security, and the best doctors can do for you is tell you to go take a bath in crocodile dung. And to pray to the gods for more, I guess. Sure, okay. So to avoid that tragedy, go for the natural look and avoid the eye drops. You'll thank me later. Number 9, more eye stuff. Thought I was done with the eye stuff? Well, guess again, amigo. I ain't done yet. I've got lots more to say about that. Okay, maybe a little. Eyeshadow and eye color. Some ladies today would say no special outfit is complete without it, and honestly, I have to agree, ladies. Sometimes y'all do some stuff with your eyes that makes me say, damn, you look good. Damn, you look good. However, some ladies might be cautious to slap some color on their face if they knew the origins of the product. As for the royalty of Egypt, eye makeup was in. Seemed to be a trend. However, they weren't so cautious of where their makeup got its origins. Egyptian eye glitter had two key ingredients: applicable powder and bugs. Yeah. You know the super colorful ones that are like really big and you wouldn't want to be around? Yeah, those, beetles, scarabs, and pretty much anything you could find. They would then crush them into a heavenly pulp and smear it all over their royal faces. I have issues with spiders and wasps as it is. I have no interest in wearing them whatsoever. I actually hate wasps. That's just, even just crushing up a bunch of, and just, oh, this is good. Oh, I love this. This is the best. Yeah, no, don't do that.
Number 8. Chocolate. When I visited the UK, the first thing I noticed was how much better your chocolate was. So good. I'm not sure what y'all are doing over there. Maybe it's just made with love. Who knows? But I'm a huge chocolate guy, and the UK nails it. Yeah, wash it down with some iron brew. Buddy, what a day. What a great day. The Mayans as well, turns out they loved chocolate. The Olmecs of Mesoamerica figured out how to consume chocolate, but the Mayans made it beautiful. They added some spice to it, literally. The Mayans would mix chocolate with water, chili peppers, and honey. They would make a spicy drink. Are you into this idea? Is this making your lips happy right now? Spicy chocolate drinks? My tummy can barely handle a pumpkin spice latte, let alone a Mayan milkshake. No thank you. Number 7. Math. One of the earliest uses of the number 0, being in mathematics, came from the Mayans. Thanks, awesome. They were super advanced in their mathematics, I would say for their time, but no, in general they were advanced. We're still trying to understand how they achieved what they did without calculators. It's impressive. They drew complex hieroglyphs on long strips of paper made from fig tree bark. They didn't have much to work with here, yet somehow it was still enough. The Maya numerical system only had 3 symbols. This was long before Bedmaz was born. They had 0, 1, and 5. That's it. You could literally count on one hand. There's a shell shape, a dab, and a bar. These numbers went from 0 to 19, and then they would count groups of 20. By time 36 BC rolled around, the Maya were introducing the concept of 0 into their numbering system. Thanks guys. I failed math twice because of those zeros. Cheers. Number 6. Glyphs. Glyphs at number 6. 6 glyphs. One of the most advanced forms of writing when it comes to all these ancient Americans, the Maya were the most ahead of their time. They invented the glyph, which are these symbols that represent a word or a sound. Like anything else in this civilization, it's beautiful to look at, of course. The Maya used around 700 different glyphs. They're detailed, they're beautiful. A good amount we're able to translate today, but there's still a mysterious chunk that we're trying to figure out. The earliest glyphs engravings go back to the 3rd century BC, meaning that the Maya are the pioneers of writing in Mesoamerica. There are only a few civilizations where writing naturally occurred: the Mayans, ancient Chinese, and the ancient Mesopotamians. Number 5. Rubber. Rubber is a fundamental. I mean, sure, the long-term effects for rubber are questionable in turn. Now we have literal pits full of tires, but where did it all begin? And why? The Maya created art, they looked to the stars and made calendars, but what did they do when they wanted to have a good time? Mayan meals were composed of maize, squash, and beans, with tons of crops. Turns out the Maya were the ones who created elastic, long before Mr. Goodyear over here. They made elastic from latex by mixing it with other plants. They really created bouncy balls, if anything. They took latex from trees and mixed it with vine juice. This was around 1600 BC, and you can't invent rubber balls without creating some. Number 4. Ball games. Yeah, imagine inventing a bouncy ball. You can now create any game you want. Any rules. You'll never lose again. How great is that? The Maya have pretty impressive ball courts. These games were all but fun, honestly. These were religious events. These games would last around 20 days on average, so I hope you warmed up that arm because you're going to be here for a while. The pressure was always on, also from the overlords, as these courts were built at the bottom of a sanctuary. Yeah, hey, no pressure, but your ex is here with Zeus. Break a leg. The go-to game was called Pocket Talk or Hodgepodge, and you had to throw a heavy elastic ball through a hoop. Instead of fist bumping at the end of the day saying good game, good game, good game, the losing side would either 1, not survive, dark, or they would have to give over all of their belongings, which also sucks. Yeah, a 20-day game, and then you'd lose all your stuff. That's horrible. What a horrible month. Number 3, art. Of course we have to mention art. I'm not saying the Mayans invented art by any means. Each of these ancient civilizations had their own way of expressing the afterlife or life in general. Art was just everywhere. The Mayans specialized in decorating stone landmarks. There's only a handful of woodcut art pieces, but the most popular are these stone pieces from Copan and Carigua. They're extremely complex as well, obviously. Look at these. Rock climbers couldn't even get their fingers in these greaves. You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy. Yet somehow people made them. These zoomorphs here are giant rock sculptures created in the shape of animals, which are always fun. And of course, the Mayans are also famous for their wall paintings dating back to 200 BC. One of the most well preserved is at Bonampak. Look at this. This is incredible. We often look at Egyptians and their art, but this is incredible too. Often overlooked. Number 2. Laws. The Maya made their own ball games, they made their own rules, they made chocolate their own way, but they also created law and order. In a time where food and shelter was sparse, you would think it would be a lot like the Dark Ages, just a bloody mess, you know, full of thieves and bodies and bad stuff everywhere. Well, when you're the first civilization to create the death penalty, everybody is pretty well behaved afterwards. More than fair, yeah, fair. Taking the life of others was uncommon because of these harsh laws. I mean, you remember how those ball games would end, right? Yeah, imagine crimes. If you were to take the life of another, say you lost a ball game, all your goods are now gone, you react in a horrible way, well, who comes knocking at your door asking questions? Who says you're now a suspect? Sherlock Holmes? No. Say you live with somebody and they commit a crime. Well, not only are they now gone after they get caught, but the victim also gets your land. They get all your goods, cattle, your home, everything. So whoever lives with you as well, you better pack your rubber balls. You're out of here. You don't live here anymore thanks to Good Game Gordo over here. I'm glad certain things stuck around, like the law and order part, but imagine being evicted because your roommate stole some beans. God damn it, Craig. Don't do that. And finally, number 1, the underworld. Also referred to as the place of fright. Okay, save the best for last, we love it. Xibalba comes from Mayan mythology. Overseen, of course, by the Mayan death gods, Xibalba came to be in the 16th century Verapaz. The entrance to such a wonderful place was in the cave of Guatemala. So, splunkers beware if you're putting that on your agenda, maybe avoid this one. Caves in Belize are actually known as the entrance to Xibalba, these water-filled caves again, and they span as far as 300 feet. That's a massive, evil front door you want to avoid right there. But you can't just grab a snorkel and frog kick your way to the underworld. It's not that easy. According to ancient Maya scripture, the Popol Vuh, this path once filled with dark obstacles, and when I say dark obstacles, I mean dark. I'm talking a river filled with scorpions and blood, combined with houses littered with bats and pure darkness. It's not easy to get through. It's like those haunted houses in Niagara Falls. It's really scary. This is why you don't cheat in Mayan ball games. You end up here. Do you want to be here? No. In fact, if you cheat in Monopoly, I believe you also end up here. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Stacy. Don't cheat.
Number 10, mummies. This should come as no surprise to anyone, but yeah, mummies. Well, not the first and not the last civilization to mummify their friends and family, ceasing to exist, they are probably most known for it. Well, that and maybe the pyramids. The pyramids are pretty cool, I guess. The process of mummifying or preserving the body was thought to be important for the soul during the afterlife. If the vessel or your body was not intact, then your soul could get lost. Therefore, if you want the pharaoh to live forever in the afterlife, then you must pickle and preserve the mighty king. I don't want my soul getting lost. Number 9, 40-year-old's worst nightmare. Despite my best efforts and anti-aging cream, there will come a time when I will be old. Personally, I'm not worried about putting some mileage on. That's life. However, something I am concerned about is the effects of aging. Have you ever just noticed that you ain't as limber as you used to be? You get tired easily, and if you have more than 3 beers, you have to lay down for 3 days. However, something that happens to a lot of men reaching their 40s is a little trouble in the bedroom. This was an issue in ancient Egypt, except sadly, there wasn't a messed up process to fix impotence. I know, right? That's crazy. You thought I was gonna say something weird like wrap a snake around it or something. But no. When in modern times the cute waitress at the golf clubhouse just doesn't get your blood pumping anymore, you can reach for a small blue pill that everybody knows. Egyptians did not possess such luxuries and instead prayed for the Pishadil to work. Dear Desert Jeebus, please make my wiener work again. Thank you.
Number 8. Inca. The Incan Empire was the largest of pre-Columbian America. The center of the empire was the city of Cusco. The Incans arose from the Peruvian highlands in the late 12th century. The Spanish began their conquest of the empire in 1532, and by 1572, the last Inca state was fully conquered. Before they fell, the Incas were able to construct one of the greatest imperial states in history. Accidentally. Without the use of a wheel, knowledge of iron or steel, or even a system of reading and writing. Yeah, these guys were good. About all 14 million of them as well. The empire included construction of monumental architecture, stone and road work reaching to all corners of the empire, and even finely woven textiles. They functioned without money and without markets. Instead, exchange of goods and services was based on individuals, groups, and rulers. Taxes consisted of a labor obligation, usually construction. Everyone was either lifting or carving, you know? The Inca rulers would even grant access to land goods and celebratory feasts for the workers if you did a good job. Dude, this place sounds awesome. Sign me up. Number 7. Indus Harappan. The Indus Valley Civilization, aka the Harappan peoples, was the first urban civilization from roughly 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE. Located in South Asia, modern-day Pakistan, and northwest India, the Harappans built dozens of sprawling cities with immense planning and architecture. I'm talking water supply systems with recycled drainage, large skyscraper-sized buildings. They even developed a number of technologies, including one of the world's first systems of weights and measurements. New techniques in metallurgy producing copper, bronze, lead, and tin. These people were smart. In addition to math and engineering, the Indus Valley Civilization enjoyed arts and crafts. Even games and toys have been found. Baked brick houses, clusters of large iron non-residential buildings, and handcrafted metallurgy. We start to see the foundations here, people. There are even 3 cities here that are now all UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The latest, in 2021, the Cilician Desert. Number 6. Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were a Semitic group of speaking people who emerged around 3000 BC. The term Phoenicia is ancient Greek, meaning a colored dye. It's debated whether Phoenicians were distinct from the broader group of speaking peoples known as the Canaanites. The term Canaanites loosely corresponds to the groups referred to as the Phoenicians, so it's a little messy back then on who's exactly who. The Phoenicians rose in the mid-12th century following the decline and collapse of the late Bronze Age. They were renowned as traders and mariners, becoming the dominant commercial power around. They developed an expansive maritime trade network, helping the exchange of cultures and ideas between Greece, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. They established colonies and trading posts across the Mediterranean as Phoenician society and culture centered around mostly commerce and seafaring. As a kicker, of course, historians and archaeologists revealed this civilization most likely has the world's oldest verified alphabets. I can't even build a boat now, let alone back then, with barely an alphabet? Like how? Number 5. Egypt. An ancient civilization in northeast Africa, situated on the Nile Valley, somewhere around 3100 BCE, splitting Upper and Lower Egypt. First occurring as a series of stable kingdoms, separated by intermediate periods such as the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, Egypt was invaded by a number of foreign powers, including the Libyans, the Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, Macedonians, and of course, the Greeks. Predictable flooding meant a timed surplus of crops, which supported larger populations year after year. The many achievements of these people include immense quarrying, surveying, and construction, using a system of mathematics and science to build and organize what we still visit today. Medicine, irrigation, boat making, the Egyptians did it all. They pushed the boundaries with glass technology, and even invented new forms of literature, and even coined the earliest known drummed-up peace treaty. Yeah, don't even get me started on the Sphinx. Have you seen this thing? It's practically being held together with glue and tape at this point. Number 4. Mesopotamia, the land of 2 rivers. Around 10,000 BCE, in what is now modern-day Iraq, some of the first fully developed Neolithic cultures began to settle in this fertile crescent, known biblically and famously as Mesopotamia. Around 8000 BCE, people in northern Mesopotamia began to cultivate barley and wheat, in which made beer, gruel, soup, and eventually even bread. This is where the earliest signs of civilization began. They were the first to develop trades such as weaving, leatherwork, metalwork, masonry. One of the greatest achievements of ancient Mesopotamia was the invention of the wheel, sometime around 3500 BCE. Mathematics and science was based on a numerical system of 60. This is the source of the 60-minute hour, the 24-hour day, and the 360-degree circle. The Sumerian calendar was 3 7-day weeks of a lunar month. They were so smart, the astronomers could predict eclipses and solstices. Beer, a calendar, and some wheels? Life was simple back then, huh? Like just not a care in the world. Number 3. The Maya. The Mesoamerican civilization of the Maya was roughly between 1800 BC and 900 AD, located within the archaeological site and the city of San Juan Teotihuacan municipality in the state of Mexico. This site has been classified a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1987. Teotihuacan was the largest city in the Americas with a population between 125,000 and at its peak, millions, making it at least the 6th largest city in the world during its reign. The Maya script is the most sophisticated, highly developed writing systems in the pre-Columbian Americas. Hieroglyphic writing was being used by the 3rd century. They are known for their art, math, calendars, and astronomical systems. Architecturally, the city consisted of palaces, ceremonial ball courts for sport and sacrifice, and of course, structures precisely aligned for astronomical observation. Number 2. Rome. In modern history, ancient Rome refers to the Roman civilization from the founding of the city in the 8th century BC to the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. It encompasses the Roman Kingdom, Roman Republic, and Roman Empire. It began as an Italic settlement. The settlement grew into the city of Rome, eventually controlling its neighbors through a combination of treaties and military strength. It eventually dominated and acquired much of Europe, and of that, the surrounding Mediterranean Sea. One of the largest empires in the ancient world. At one point, roughly a quarter of the world's population. Contributed to modern language, religion, society, technology, government, warfare, art. Do as the Romans do, right? Its military created a system of government which was the inspiration for modern republics such as the United States and France. They achieved impressive feats, such as the empire-wide construction of bridges, ports, and roads, as well as the monuments and megalithic buildings splattered all around the world. Every time I flush a toilet, I'm like, man, these guys were good. Number 1. Turkey. Located in the foothills of the Taurus Mountains, we arrive at Gobekli Tepe. This Neolithic site lays in the southeastern Anatolia region of Turkey and is dated around 9500 BCE. The site consists of a number of large circular structures supported by massive stone pillars. Long story short, it's the first construction site of anything. Ever. The pillars are richly decorated with abstract, anthropomorphic carvings of people, clothing, and wild animals, thus providing archaeologists insight into this prehistoric peoples and what they were about. Considered the oldest permanent human settlements anywhere in the world, historians link this revolution to the invention and precursor of agriculture. Gobekli Tepe is a monumental complex built on the top of a rocky mountain far from any known sources of water, and having produced no evidence of agricultural has sparked numerous debates over the years. The site's original excavator, Klaus Schmidt, described it as the Earth's first temple ever, a sanctuary used by groups of nomadic hunter-gatherers from all over the world with no permanent inhabitants. Classified a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2018, radiocarbon dating shows that the earliest exposed structures at Gobekli Tepe were built around 11,500 years ago. It's regarded by some as the archaeological discovery of many lifetimes, since it could profoundly change the understanding of the development of human society and when it exactly started.
Number 10. Hathor. The goddess Hathor was originally created by her dad, Ra, as a destroyer of men. She was supposed to punish all those who were disobedient to him. But then Ra was like, nah, I don't really like that idea. He just kind of changed his mind and decided to make her the exact opposite. Instead, the goddess of love. But she kind of loved killing men, and even he couldn't stop her. So one night he gave her what was supposed to be a mug of ale, but actually made it like a special kind of blood, and she got so drunk off of it that she got too tired out to kill anymore and therefore became the goddess of love. Drunk in love, am I right? Her cult was centered in Dendera, where she was also seen as the goddess of fertility and childbirth. When the Greeks occupied Egypt, they compared her with the goddess Aphrodite. But unlike the voluptuous woman Aphrodite was depicted as, Hathor came in 3 forms, and I bet you can't guess which. She was depicted as either a woman with a cow's ears, wearing the headdress of a cow, or just a cow. Moo. Number 9. The beginning of the world. What an inventive way to imagine the beginning of things. I mean, the Big Bang is still pretty crazy too, but hey, here we go. Freaking love how much magic is in these stories, like I'm in, because that's all there was at the beginning of the universe according to the ancient Egyptians. Just swirling darkness, chaos, and magic. Heka, the god of magic, was the only thing that existed, waiting for the opportune moment to begin. Then a hill showed up called Ben Ben, and out of which the god Atum erupted from. He was lonely, so he mated with his own shadow to give birth to 2 children, Shu and Tefnut. Shu gave life, Tefnut gave order. They left their father to build the world, but they were gone so long he took out his eye and sent it to search for them. In the meantime, he just kinda sat there, contemplating eternity, all alone. He was really sad. This guy sounds like Zeus mixed with Eeyore. Anyways, his kids came back and he was so happy he wept tears of joy, and out of which were born men and women. They also brought his eye back, so that was nice.
Love saying this next one's name. It's Pumapunku. Stats: where? Tiwanaku, La Paz, Bolivia. When? Somewhere around 500 CE until question mark. Strengths: precision carving and advanced architecture. Weaknesses: being accused of having aliens help. Fun fact: in Amara, Pumapunku means the door of the puma. Pumapunku was a city already abandoned when the Incas conquered the area in 1470. Predating that, we have no idea who built it and what happened to them. Alright, segment done. Moving on. No, not really, but could you imagine? Yeah, no, so it was already empty when the Incas came there, and they spared no expense incorporating Pumapunku and the rest of Tiwanaku City into their empire, believing it to be the place of their deity of creation, and where that deity created the ancestral people of all ethnicities and sent them out in the world to populate the respective lands. So, Incas believed the fallen stone portraits near Pumapunku to be the models of those first humans from the creation myth. These stone figures, however, are just depictions from the city's former rulers. The exact origin and age of the site is endlessly disputed. As archaeologists know, Pumapunku was a thriving ancient town originating from somewhere around 500 to 600 CE, and it's got mankind's most incredible stonework. Each is cut in such a precise way that they fit together perfectly and lock into each other. Not even a razor blade can slide between them. Naturally, their perfection is all the evidence ancient alien believers need to grab the tinfoil hat. May recognize this next name, it's Etrurias. So, stats time. Where? Central Italy. When? 800 to 250 BCE. Strengths: construction enterprise, iron and copper trade, urban planning. Weaknesses: poor army, territory desirable to invaders, and locality to Rome. Fun fact: the Etruscans invented the idea of armed and contact sport, or as we more commonly know them to be, gladiators. The civilization reached the height of its power in the 6th century BCE when 12 city-states were allied to be the Etruscan League. Being the first real major settlement on the Italian peninsula, Etruria became the basis of the civilization in late antiquity to follow. They were one of the first peoples to dispose of kings and be ruled by the intelligentsia of aristocrats and magistrates, and their architecture and construction techniques arguably influenced the Romans as much as the Greeks did, as did the city's overall build and stylization. Even the Latin alphabet and the Roman toga have their origins with the Etruscan people. The growing Roman military juggernaut found Etruria too good to pass up, and their League of City-States was annexed into the new Roman Republic in 250 BCE. Alrighty, we are moving on now to the Vinca civilization. Stats are: where? Lebanon and Israel. When? 4000 to 332 BCE. Strengths: peaceful and diplomatic city-states, maritime strength, dye and metal production. Weaknesses: minimal military strength, no real capital city or stronghold. And the fun fact is that the ancient Olympic Games started in Vinca. So, Vinca is known as Canaan in Hebrew and is named after the Phoenicians, a Greek word for purple, due to their production of the purple dye, which would later become the color of royalty and aristocracy in Greece and Rome, and actually a lot of other places. They were the greatest pioneers of sea travel in the ancient world, arguably, and were a peaceful people, never having had a civil war. Equally unknown to many, they are credited with the founding of Carthage, a city that would actually become a major center in both the Carthaginian and Roman empires. This peaceful and diplomatic reputation helped them stave off invasion for a prolonged period, as did their openness to trading and befriending pretty much any nation they came across, as far as Spain and Portugal. Prior to Alexander the Great's conquest, the Persians invaded Vinca lands in 539 BCE, but the Macedonian invasion following that was more devastating. After that decline, the Phoenicians became a Roman state in 64 CE and developed a Hellenistic society. Shuffling our way forward, we're now doing Assyria. Stats, where? So, Iran and Syria, when 2400 BCE to 1300 CE, their strengths are technological advances, iron weapons, and emphasis on education, and their weaknesses, proximity to other strong kingdoms, and their administration spread a little too thinly. Fun factoid, Assyria contained several zoos as one of their kings was obsessed with animals. And not only were they the pioneers of animal domestication, but Assyrian unique policy for defeated powers was to not incorporate their people into the nation, but deport them and ensure there's no rebellion under their rule, which is literally the smartest thing I've heard from an ancient civilization. Instead of just taking the whole bunch of people, just leave them there. Exceptions were only made if the individual or group was believed to be of greater use to the Assyrians, such as scholars, because one of the Assyrians' greatest achievements was in education, as the school of Nispis is believed to be the first ever university. The Assyrians were also attributed with building some of the first aqueducts and arches, hundreds of years before the Romans, and introducing the modern idea of keeping time. The final Assyrian demise is shrouded in mystery, but it's believed they entered a dark age in 1300 after constant wars with the Byzantine Empire. After their empire crumbled, their civilization saw a mass influx of Jewish and Arabian people, and in came high taxes on the Christian Assyrians, who mostly folded under the pressure to convert to Islam. As the Assyrians were ethnically distinct from both Arabs and Jews, this effectively ended the idea of being Assyrian. I mentioned this civilization in a recent video and a little bit before. Let's regroup with the Tiwanaku. This civilization proved you didn't need an army to survive. Stat time, where? Bolivia. When? 500 to 900. Strengths, good agricultural location, construction techniques, expert farmers. Weaknesses, no writing system, overuse of their farming land, no military presence. And fun fact, Tiwanaku cities were so grand that when the Incas discovered them, they believed they were made by the gods. So, Tiwanaku had colonized both Chile and Peru. They were a multi-ethnic society who had settled in the upper reaches of the Andes and now are remembered for the remarkable monuments that still stand today, as well as their underground drainage for fresh and soiled water, paved streets, and cities that were planned in a grid system. Tiwanaku became expert farmers and pioneered a method of farming known as flood-raised field agriculture, which used an effective system of irrigation. This well-fed population of over 10,000 allowed the Tiwanaku to expand into many other areas of South America. The civilization was at its peak of its powers in the 8th century, but mysteriously ended in the 9th. No one's quite sure why the Tiwanaku disappeared, but it's believed that they, as well as other similar culture known as the Wari, were victims of a dramatic shift in climate which devastated crops and caused a mass starvation. As they had no writing system, the Tiwanaku are truly a forgotten civilization. Always a fun word to say, Minoan life is next. Stats, where? Crete. When? 3000 to 1100 BCE. Strengths, bureaucratic hierarchy, shipbuilding, knowledge of metallurgy. Weaknesses, weak military, and natural disasters. Your fun Minoan fact is that the Minoans had a sport that involved jumping over bulls' horns. Of all the lost civilizations, the Minoans may be the most mysterious. Arguably the first European civilization, they first settled in Crete in about 3000 BCE and remained isolated there for literal centuries before establishing trades. Minoan culture originally had no centralized government and a flexible ruling system with large grand palaces acting as a key area of administration. Their tombs, known as tholos, were a key architectural feature along with their paved road system, running water, and pottery that were later incorporated by Greek and Roman civilizations. By 2000 BCE, kings had assumed control of the island, signaling the beginning of a bureaucratic system and social hierarchy, and women also played a large role in that society, serving as administrators and priestesses, and they had the same rights as men. It's that kind of unity that made Minoans very remarkable. But womp womp, around 1700 BCE, an earthquake rips Crete a new one and destroys most of the island's settlements. They managed to recover from this natural disaster, but now had the Greeks and the Mycenaeans threatening trade interests. Their luck got even worse when in 1375, the island's largest city, Knossos, was devastated and crippled the Minoan people, who were dispatched by an oncoming invasion in 1100 BCE. Oh yeah, ladies, homies, and gents, it's Indus Valley time. What are their stats? So where? India, Afghanistan, Pakistan. When? 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE, and in its mature forms 2600 BCE to 1900 BCE. Strengths, extremely advanced mathematics and metallurgy. Weaknesses, natural disaster, overpopulation, failed trade. Fun fact, unlike other ancient civilizations, archaeologists have never found any evidence of palaces or temples in the Indus Valley, which suggests that there were no priests or kings. The Indus River Valley civilization of 3300 to 13 BC was also known as the Harappan civilization. They were important innovators, but little is understood about the Indus script, and as a result, little is known about the Indus River Valley civilization's institutions and system of governance. What is 100% known is this was likely the most advanced ancient society there had ever been. So, what could have made it end? Historians believe things start to fall apart in 1900 BC, and by 1700, many of the Indus Valley cities had been abandoned. Trade was very important to their civilization. Their main trade partner was Mesopotamia, and around the time the Indus cities started to fail, Mesopotamia was going through huge political problems and their trade networks collapsed. This would have had a big impact on work, thus money. So some historians think this is what collapsed the Indus cities. Alternatively, Indus civilization collapsed because of changes to the geography and climate of the area. Movements in the Indus River may have changed the direction or caused flood. The main cities were closely linked to the river, so changes would have had a terrible effect and driven everyone out. And last but never the least, we've got Vinca. Last stats round. So, our where is Serbia and Kosovo primarily, but also Bosnia, Romania, Bulgaria, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Greece. When? From 5700 to 4500 BC. Strengths, cultural uniformity and metallurgy, and also being insanely advanced. Weaknesses, not trading enough statues. Last fun fact of the video, they were so modern their houses, clothing, and jewelry are all stylistically incredibly similar to ours now. Vinca culture and its people begin in the mid-6th millennia BC when the second wave of migration came to the Balkans from the shores of Asia Minor to create the largest Neolithic settlement in all of Europe. Research and analysis of artifacts and the settlements revealed that a culture and a community of people that had actually had a very advanced way of life for the time. Until this day, no weapons have ever been found during excavations, and it makes us draw the conclusion that they were not warriors but peaceful and gentle. Remains of houses show traces of insulation against elements, and inside houses were intricate multi-room layouts and water systems. Finding decorative ceramic cups and sophisticated tools all speak to a relatively comfortable lifestyle, as does the mini dresses and the shorts and the fitted pants and skirts and the dainty jewelry. Possibly the most interesting find is the presence of copper objects and metallurgy, which date from well before the Metal Ages began. However, it's the same copper that caused the disappearance of the Vinca culture. While people out here made fortunes on the jewelry and the tools of copper, others used it to make weapons and seize their treasure. As the people of Vinca were painfully peaceful, the downfall then began.
Number 10. Corral. The sacred city of Corral is an archaeological site considered to be one of the oldest known civilizations in the Americas. The formation of the civilization took place around 3500 BCE and ran to about 1800 BCE. No other site has been found with such a diversity of buildings and architecture and has since been declared a Humanity Cultural Heritage Site by UNESCO themselves. Uncovered around 1905, Peruvian archaeologists provided the first documentation on the civilization at Corral. They appear to have an economy of some sort, selling mostly textiles and fish. The civilization is considered a pre-ceramic culture, since archaeologists have yet to find any sculpted or painted art. However, they did find a system of writing called quipu, which is a string-based recording device suggesting a proto-writing of some sort. They were widely known for their architecture of huge earth-landscaped projects of mounds, particularly a massive labyrinth of underground circular connecting plazas. They were ahead of their time, yeah. Number 9. The Etruscans. Side note, if you dig what we do here on Bumblebee, make sure to Hulk smash that like button for us, huh? The Etruscan civilization was a people of Etruria in ancient Italy. They had a common language, culture, and formed a federation of cities. Their territory covered now what is Tuscany, Umbria, and Lazio. The earliest evidence of this culture is from about 900 BC. This is the period of the Iron Age considered to be the earliest phase of Etruscan civilization. With a maximum population peaking around 750 BC, the earliest examples of writing are inscriptions found around 700 BC. They developed a system of writing derived from the Euboean alphabet. The language remains only partly understood, making modern understanding of their society and culture heavily dependent on later Roman and Greek sources.
Number 8. Ahead of their time. Ancient Egyptians just may have been ahead of their time and didn't know it. The Egyptians had tons of different herbs, plants, and methods for treating all kinds of ailments. Their alchemy skill was maxed out. I never did that. However, one method they came up with may have been helping more than they thought. A porridge mixture that was boiled down that contained tetracycline, which, just in case you didn't know, is known as an antibiotic. This would have been very helpful for the time, as a scrape on the knee could be the difference between living and, well, not living. While this was being used, it's unsure if the Egyptians really knew why this method worked. We doubt they understood the finite details of antibiotics, and I'm not gonna stand here and pretend that I do either, cause I don't. Number 7. Tales from the Crypt Keeper. You didn't think I was gonna talk about mummies and not talk about how they make them, right? Hold on to your spittoons, this is gonna be a rough one. Okay, so we all know that when we pass on, our bodies begin to decay and break down. The Egyptians knew this, so they would have to be one step ahead if they were to have the king pickled in time for the afterlife. Well, first things first, the brains? They gotta go. They would remove the brain with a large spike and sort of mash it up there and then they drain the contents from the nose, which that is just disgusting. Stomach, colon, and lungs, well, those won't be needed in the afterlife either, so they gotta go too. But the heart stays though. That's where the soul is. The king was then dried out with mounds of alkaline salt in the world's best beef jerky impression. Afterwards, oils were rubbed into the skin and eventually a resin was applied to aid in the linen wrap sticking to the body, making for that distinct Tupperware brand airtight seal. The pickled king was wrapped numerous more times just to be safe, and then, if he was OG enough, placed into a sarcophagus, and if you're really cool, you'll get your own room full of gold and treasures, and your pet Whiskers, which is a cat, and be mummified because, well, you need him in the afterlife too. That is one heck of an undertaking process. And to be fair, it kinda worked, because there have been a few mummies recovered from Egypt, and they're in amazing condition, considering the age, of course. Number 6, a little off the top. Okay, without the comment section oversharing here, some people have had circumcisions and some haven't. It's a part of life, okay? That's how it goes. Debatable to some, but it happens. This was a common practice in ancient Egypt, claimed to be for hygiene reasons. However, there's something a little bit different about their process. See, today it happens when you're a baby. A strange man comes in the room, and he cuts what he has to cut. L'chaim, it's done. There it is. That's it. It's over. Egyptians waited a little longer, however, closer to the age of 12 or 13. Can you imagine just chilling in the field one day, and then some strange dude grabs you and slaps you down on the table and makes a withdrawal from you to meat and veg? I talked to the chief today, and he just said that's not it. Don't do that. Number 5, bloodletting. The practice of bloodletting was common all over the world, but it may have gotten its start in ancient Egypt. It's a quite simple procedure, really. Black bile out of whack? Lose some blood. Can't stop coughing and sneezing? Drain some blood. Been possessed by demons and now they curse and haunt you as they run up and down your bloodstream? Drain some blood. The question is, however, was this really helping? The short answer, no. No, it wasn't. Besides feeling lightheaded and going pale, this didn't really achieve much, since the days of old were filled with all kinds of other ailments that would easily end someone's life before the spooky demons running up and down someone's bloodstream ever would. I don't feel good. Oh, we better bleed Grandpa again. I don't know, like what? Number 4, plastic surgery. Hey, there's nothing wrong with a little cosmetic surgery. I for one feel that if it'll make you feel better, go for it. Feel better about yourself. Do it. I don't think there's any shame in that. It's been around for a long time, so long that ancient Egyptians might have come up with the first nose jobs. Obviously not like the ones today, but they were knowledgeable in surgeries. After all, you open the chest cavity of a dozen kings and you jot some stuff down on some papyrus, you learn a thing or two. More interesting than shaving down your own beak, however, was their implementation of the prosthesis limbs. Yes, all the way back then. One mummy was actually found with a fake toe. When tested in the modern day with period-accurate sandals, it proved to work quite well and moved more efficiently than first thought. Again, for the time, this was pretty advanced. Number 3, the Ode of the Nile. Imagine people working all day in the blistering sands of Egypt, where the sun beams down on you like, well, the sun in the desert, lifting massive rocks and carving them to shape. I don't know about you guys, but I would be sweating. And that also means I wouldn't be smelling too fresh, resembling that of a high school locker room. Yuck. Well, the Egyptians knew this was an issue, so they came up with what was probably the first underarm deodorant, using nice herbs and other items that had pleasant aromas, and stuck them where the odor was coming from. In your armpits. I just know that after a long day of hard labor in the sun, I would need more than cinnamon sticks and lavender to tame the odor of my sweaty lumberjack armpits. That's just how it goes. Number 2, the Egyptian Brazilian. The 70s have come and gone, and a popular trend today is to be hairless. Everywhere. Even in places where you didn't think it was possible to grow hair when you were younger. Egyptians took it upon themselves to remove all their hair. Well, at least most of it. Not because the Nile River had nice beaches, but because of lice. Oh, yuck. While not an exact cure for the itchy bugs that plague schools across America, it did seem to help. And if you've ever had lice before, you know how bad that sucks. I had them once. It was the worst. Cut my hair, shave my head. Lots of baths. It's no fun, man. Too cute for that. I don't want that. Number 1, Wario breath. Wow. Okay. It makes sense that Egyptians would come up with breath mints and mouthwash. They fed their laborers diets of foods that contained a lot of onions and garlic. Sure, I'm just like everyone else who cooks. And when the recipe asks for 1 onion, maybe I put in 2. When it asked for 2 cloves of garlic, maybe I put in 4. You gotta love that flavor. It was thought that they help fight off disease, and they were kinda right. However, after eating all that flavor, your breath would be something rancid. So herbs and mints were used to help quell the breath that could peel the paint off of walls. Thank God.
Such as the fact they really loved enemas. Yeah, bet you didn't expect that for number 10. The consumption of entheogens in the Americas dates back to the Olmec civilization, the earliest known Mesoamerican civilization. Evidently, this tradition was passed down and spread amongst many clans, with the consumption techniques evolving through generations. In the case of the Maya, well, they evidently understood the absorption processes of the lower digestive tract, because that's where they like their entheogens and P-actives and alcohol. And hilariously, this discovery is made through pottery. The first of these polychrome pottery jars was discovered in 1977, and several have been found since. Naturally, this became the subject of a landmark study in 1986, which analyzed the iconographic traditions of the Maya pottery pieces depicting the administration of enemas, and compiled a list of possible substances the Maya may have ingested. Then, to really drive it home, Peter, one of the paper's writers, decided to self-administer some Maya enema mix to test it out, and to quote him and his buddy who helped, the results certainly support the theoretical suggestion that alcohol is absorbed well from an enema. I can't believe 2 scientists owned up to getting ass drunk in a professional dialogue like they're small town teens. But now that the prestigious IG Nobel Prize has been awarded in 2022 to the scholars that pioneered this Maya enema research oh so long ago, we can expect more research on this topic in the coming years, and likely more than a few researchers giving themselves multiple laced enemas for study purposes. And when the enema is done, well, put a cork in it, dude. We got some work to do. Number 9 is obsidian dealers. The Mayas were cutting it up when it came to the obsidian game. Obsidian, which is also known as volcanic glass, was highly valued for its sharpness and durability back in the good old days. It also held deep cultural and historical significance in the Maya world. Naturally, Guatemala, which is renowned for its obsidian deposits, was a major mining and trading site for the Maya. Skilled craftsmen shaped obsidian into intricate tools, weapons, and household items and ceremonial artifacts. Through analysis of obsidian sources, researchers have traced in ancient networks and trade exchange routes that connected distant Maya territories. The Maya reverence for obsidian traveled as far as the product itself ended up doing, and it lingered even after the savage colonizers had laid siege to their advanced civilization, becoming a prize belonging in Europe shortly after the colonization of Central and South America in the mid-16th century. John Dee, the prominent Elizabethan-era psychonaut, was an English astronomer and occultist who famously possessed a black obsidian scrying mirror, which he believed allowed him to communicate with celestial beings. The specific detail of how and where he obtained the mirror are not extensively documented, but it can be assumed to be Mexico or Guatemala.
Number 8, sweet traps. When you're royalty of one of the most successful empires and civilizations in human history, it means you ain't gonna lift a finger. Less than any other celebrities do today, probably. So what to do with all that extra time in your hands instead of living like everyone else? Well, how about a picnic? That sounds nice, actually. Sounds great, right? Except when we bring out all of our favorite treats, the flies and bugs bother us, and we can't look beautiful if we're covered in bugs head to toe. How did the Egyptians fix this, you ask? Well, it's simple. don't let the bugs bite you in the first place. Basically, you get one of your forced volunteers, maybe a couple actually, and you slather the poor devils in honey, till they look like your favorite pastry from Tim Hortons. Place said glazed serving away from the picnic, and now you can enjoy it in sunshine and peace. The screaming of being eaten alive by bugs might dampen the mood, so just wear earplugs, it's fine. You stay over there and just get eaten, it's fine. No problem. No problem. Number 7. Unhooded Sith. Circumcision is important in a lot of cultures of yesterday and today. Now at this channel, my job is to come out here every week and make you laugh. So to the men out there who still have their Jedi robes, imagine every day of your life you got sand in places that sand shouldn't be. Anakin Skywalker's worst nightmare, and honestly explains why he hates sand so much. But perhaps one of the reasons Egyptians used this hygiene service was to stop sand getting in their wiener's one-eyed bandit. There's no showers, nothing to really get it out once it's in there. That's no good. I guess you could take a dip in the Nile River, but there's too many crocodiles in there, and who has the time to jump in the Nile River when they're busy being forced to build large structures that will stand the test of time? So you better line up, fellas, or be cursed to feel like Anakin Skywalker for the rest of your life. The prequel one too, not the cool animated one, the one that whines a lot. That one. You don't want to be that one. Number 6. Nice dentist. Turns out not all Egyptian dentistry is completely awful. It turns out they may have come up with the first toothbrush. Other civilizations had examples of one too, so it's hard to tell exactly, but the Egyptians had one. But one thing they did have over everyone else were Tic Tacs, or breath mints actually. Honestly, this makes a lot of sense. Imagine it was Valentine's Day, you just walked past a large pyramid. There's sand in places on your body where sand just shouldn't be. When you notice the smell of your breath, and it's something awful. But not to worry, because you purchased breath mints from the market. Yes, that's right. Now smooching with your Egyptian sweetheart can go on without a hitch. The mints were made from nice smelling herbs and mints, sometimes roasted over a fire to form little candies. An ancient Egyptian solution to an ancient Egyptian problem. Kinda like that one actually, kinda nice. Could put a mint in, it's kinda nice. Number 5. What? I didn't have any corn! Austin Powers reference for you. You know the character I'm talking about, I can't say it. Here's a hygiene product that just makes me question life. The very fabric of our existence. Whether it was the Big Bang or the almighty creator, there's just no way this was ever meant to happen. It doesn't make any sense. One day, somebody was walking along the Nile River and was unfortunate enough to step in crocodile droppings. Now, most people would say gross and move on. Oh, no, not the people of ancient Egypt. They felt the stinky, squishy unholiness on their feet and said, yes, we must bathe in this. And they did. They took the forbidden mud bath, the brown tsunami, the cesspit of no hope. You can call it whatever you want, really, it's horrible either way you look at it. Supposedly it was meant to keep you young and beautiful. My only question would be, at what point did they realize poo baths were a mistake? Was it when they were smelling it and it was bad? Or was it when it accidentally got in your mouth or something like that and you're just like, oh what got that out of my mouth? That's the Scottish Egyptian, in case you were wondering. Number 4, waste removal. This one is kind of a broad stroke, but hear me out. There's no plumbing, no waste removal, and people kind of just go wherever they want. A lot of that unhygienic waste is kind of just laying about. However, the people of Egypt also had the advantage of the Nile River, which means they use that bad boy for everything. Transport, irrigation, a water source, and of course, a bathroom. Which, in case you didn't know, your source of water and irrigation should be two separate, they shouldn't go together, that's not good. This is a good explanation for the plagues of Egypt, besides the sin, bad sinners, no sinning. As years of that kind of negligent waste management are liable to make any pharaoh sick. Don't mix your water with the poo, don't do that, that's bad, don't do that. Number 3, sunscreen. This should come as no secret to anyone out there, but with my rosy cheeks and fair complexion, I would not do very well in the suns of ancient Egypt. Honestly, I don't know how Luke Skywalker lived on Tatooine with those twin suns. Without a little copper tone action, you know what I'm saying? The Egyptians had an answer to that problem, however. Not the whole living on Tatooine part, that just kinda sucks no matter what. Blue milk is weird. They had a makeshift sunscreen using rice bran extracts and a few other ingredients that were meant to help protect against the sun's rays. How effective was it really? Not sure, cause the only stuff I'm willing to test out is the real stuff. And if I get burnt, then I start peeling. And then somebody has to rub aloe vera all over me. Be right back, I'm gonna get some sun. Number 2, cursed craft dinner. You've got no plumbing in your palace, and it's time for dinner. So how does an Egyptian royal make his favorite pot of KD without water? I mean, if college kids can do it in their dorm room, surely they can master the art of post-secondary cuisine. Well, for some unlucky folks, it means taking a pot and walking down to that old Nile River, almost like people rely on water or something, and take a big scoop of water and bring it back. But while you begin to scoop some water, you may notice someone is picking up crocodile dung. And people are bathing in the water. And to your left, there's a maiden washing clothes, and to your right, there's a man doing something I can't repeat on YouTube. Oh well, time to scoop some more water up and consume this clean, nice water at home. Oh, this is the best. Tastes like the village. It's nice. Number 1, pink milkshake. Does it still count as hygiene if you ain't breathing? I say yes. Besides the pyramids and maybe the Nile, mummies are the most famous things about Egypt. And in a weird way, it is hygiene. Hygiene for the afterlife. When someone super important passes on, it's time for a little game of operation. Stomach, liver, intestines are removed and put into jars. You never know when you might need that next. The heart is left because it's the heart, and the Egyptians were die-hard poets, so you got souls in there, you gotta keep that. The most grim process to me, however, is turning the human brain into a forbidden milkshake by mashing it with a small spike and then draining it out in what must have been the grossest waterfall ever. Oh god, oh god, that's so gross. Anyway, then you take some linen and start wrapping the mummy up like a dad wrapping last minute gifts on Christmas Eve. Bada bing, bada boom, there you go. Buddy is prepped for the afterlife. Don't mind me, I'm just gonna be sick from the brain milkshake. Ooh.